Imagine this. You spend 26 years raising your daughter, teaching her right from wrong, working 16-hour days just to give her a better life. You pay for her school, her college, her apartment, and finally her wedding. $500,000, your life's work poured into one perfect day. And then, she looks out at 350 guests and introduces another man as her father. My name is Jim Hayes, and that day I learned what betrayal really looks like. Picture it. Your own daughter standing on stage, her voice trembling with excitement, calling someone else dad while you sit alone at table 18 next to the kitchen door, the hum of the caterers drowning out the sound of your breaking heart. Every crystal glass, every flower, every bite of food, all of it paid for by the man she just declared dead. But here's the part she didn't know. I was still holding the final check, $340,000. The money that would keep her dream wedding running. What happened next? Even I didn't see coming. The Ashford Estate, Greenwich, Connecticut. Saturday, June 15th, 2024, 4:30 in the afternoon. I pull my old 2019 Ford F-150 into the valet line behind a parade of Bentleys and Mercedes. The valet kid can't be older than 20. He gives me this look, like I've just dragged a mud-covered pickup into a black tie gala. But he takes my keys anyway, probably out of pity. The tuxedo I'm wearing, rented from Men's Warehouse, it feels like a costume. $89 for the day. Around me, every man wears suits, tailored so perfectly they probably cost more than my first truck. But here's what they don't see. I built a business from nothing. 30 years of sweat, dirt, and busted knuckles. Hayes Plumbing and Property Solutions. We don't just fix pipes, we build futures. And tonight, every chandelier hanging above their heads, I paid for it. Inside, light from crystal chandeliers spills across the ballroom. 1,000 points of light bouncing off gold-trimmed glasses and silver-plated smiles. 350 of Connecticut's finest, old money as they like to call themselves, doctors, lawyers, real estate moguls, families whose names you see carved into university buildings. And there's Victoria, my daughter, the bride. She's glowing, wearing a $32,000 Vera Wang gown that I wrote the check for. She sees me. Our eyes meet for one single second, then she looks away. A wedding planner with a clipboard approaches. You must be. She flips through her papers. Ah, table 18, by the kitchen, by the buzzing speakers, by the staff rushing trays of champagne to the important people. That's me. And Victoria? She's at table 1, the center of the room, next to her new family, the Whitmore clan. Preston Whitmore III, Harvard graduate, trust fund, family money older than the paint on their estates. His father, Preston Sr., owns half the commercial buildings in Fairfield County. I take my seat at table 18. My table fills with distant cousins, polite plus ones, people who barely know me. We make small talk about the weather, about how beautiful the venue is. Nobody asks what I do. Probably better that way. Across the room, I watch my daughter smiling for photographers, posing with the Whitmores like she was born into their world. When guests ask about her family, she gestures toward table 1. Her father, Richard Morrison, a silver-haired man in his 60s, sharp tuxedo, someone I've never seen before in my life. And in that moment, as she laughs and hugs him for the cameras, I feel the kind of silence that only comes when something inside you breaks. 26 years of being her father. 26 years of scraped knees, school drop-offs, late-night homework, and Christmas mornings. I missed 3 birthdays. 3. And every time it was because a customer's pipe burst or their basement flooded. I fixed it, and I made it up to her every single time. I paid for her private school when she fell behind, $14,000 a year. I paid for Yale, $68,000 a year for 4 years. I paid for her Manhattan apartment when she couldn't find work, $3,000 a month. And now I was paying for this. The venue, $180,000. Catering, $85,000. Flowers, $28,000. String quartet from the New York Philharmonic, $15,000. Photographer, $12,000. Cake, $8,500. All of it mine. But she made one mistake. She forgot who actually signed every contract, because my name was on every single one. The cocktail hour starts. Laughter, music, champagne. But from table 18, it all feels far away. She's performing, playing the role of the grateful daughter rescued by her new family. Every smile feels like a knife. And I realize, if I stay quiet, I lose more than money. I lose respect. You see, I started Hayes Plumbing in 1994 with 1 van and a rusted toolbox. Worked 16-hour days for 5 years straight, peanut butter sandwiches for dinner, no vacations, no safety net. But I listened. I learned. And I bought my first property from a client whose faucet I fixed it up myself, rented it, bought another, and another. Now, 23 locations, last year's revenue, $8.9 million. But to my daughter, I was still the plumber, the embarrassment, the man who came home with dirty hands and calloused fingers. She had no idea I owned more property than half the people in that ballroom combined. So when she texted me, "Daddy, please don't mention the plumbing business tonight. It's important to me," something inside me snapped. 30 years of sacrifice, reduced to a shameful secret. I looked around at the chandeliers, the flowers, the guests dripping with borrowed elegance, and I made a decision. Some lessons can only be taught the hard way. An hour passes. 3 guests approach me. People I've done work for. Margaret Henderson, flooded basement last winter. Dr. Walsh, medical building renovation in 2019. Sarah Chen, Christmas Eve emergency at her restaurant in 2022. Jim Hayes, Margaret says, surprised. "I didn't expect to see you here." Father of the bride, I say quietly. Her smile fades. Confusion, realization, sympathy. Oh, Victoria never mentioned. She keeps her private life private, I say, but her voice carries. Conversations pause, heads turn. Whispers ripple through the crowd like spilled wine across a white tablecloth. "That's the plumber. Victoria's father. I thought she said he was." Within minutes, the truth spreads across the ballroom. And that's when Preston Whitmore Sr. walks over. Perfect suit, perfect smile, perfect arrogance. "You must be Jim. Victoria's told us so much about you." Polite lie. She's told him nothing. "Have we met before?" he asks. "I fixed your kitchen pipes last March," I say. "Emergency call, Sunday morning." His smile falters, just for a second, then returns, tighter this time. "Ah, yes. Excellent work. You're a very practical man. Not successful, not respected, practical, like a wrench you use when needed and put back in the drawer." He pats my shoulder, walks away, and suddenly every set of eyes in the room feels heavier. I glance at Victoria. She's pale, angry, afraid. Her fiancé, Preston III, leans in, whispers something. His jaw tightens as he looks at me. He walks over. Harvard MBA, handshake like a damp sponge. "Sir," he says, "I want to thank you for raising such an incredible woman." "She is incredible," I reply. "Victoria mentioned you've had some challenges over the years." "Challenges? You mean work?" "You mean work? We all have challenges," I say evenly. He smiles that rich man smile. "Don't worry, she'll never have to worry about money again. The Whitmore family takes care of its own. Its own, like she'd been adopted out of poverty." "That's generous of you," I say. "Family is everything to us," he says, "blood or otherwise." And that's when I knew this wasn't just about social class. It was about ownership. They didn't see me as family. They saw me as a story, the poor plumber who built their fairy tale. What they didn't realize was that I still held the strings. My attorney, Richard Polson, had been watching from a few tables away, 15 years of friendship. I'd asked him to bring documents, contracts, statements, everything. "Seems excessive," he'd said earlier. "Insurance," I told him. And now I was damn glad I did, because as the clock hit 7:45, the venue manager, Catherine Brooks, approached with 2 assistants. "Mr. Hayes, could we speak privately?" We step aside. "Sir, there's been some concern about the final payment, $340,000. The contract states payment must be made before service begins." I check my phone. The transfer's scheduled, not sent. "No problem," I say, "as long as the service meets our agreed standards." Her eyes flicker. She realizes who actually holds the power here. And for the first time all night, I feel calm. Because in business, in life, signatures matter more than surnames. 8:10 p.m. My phone buzzes again. Unknown number. "Mr. Hayes, this is David Chen from the Fairfield County Social Register. We're covering the wedding tonight. I'm not interested in interviews." "Actually, sir," I was calling about the catering situation. "I understand there's been confusion about the payment structure." Word travels fast in Greenwich. "No confusion," I say. "Everything's exactly as it should be." He hesitates. "Will the reception proceed as scheduled?" I look up. The chandeliers shimmer. Guests laugh nervously. My daughter stands in her designer gown, smiling like nothing's wrong. But under that perfect surface, cracks are forming. Because in less than an hour, that $340,000 check either clears or it doesn't. And when it doesn't, the lights will dim. The music will stop, the champagne will dry up, and everyone will finally see who really made this night possible. So I lean back in my chair at table 18, watching the clock tick closer to 9. Because sometimes the best lessons aren't spoken, they're felt. And tonight, my daughter was about to feel everything she'd spent her life trying to forget. the truth, the cost, and the moment when the man she called dead decided to come back to life. To be continued. He was calling because someone had tipped him off that tonight's wedding of the season might not go according to plan. I smiled. "You'll have to wait and see," I told him. Then I hung up. The ballroom was a cathedral of money. Gold chandeliers glittering above 350 of Greenwich's finest, the air thick with perfume, pride, and the faint scent of champagne. Near the bar, Preston Whitmore Sr. was holding court. He was regaling guests with stories about his latest yacht, a sleek $2 million toy that, as he reminded everyone, he'd only use 6 weekends a year. He spoke loudly, just loud enough for the entire room to hear about his casual relationship with wealth, because that's what old money does. It doesn't just own things, it performs ownership. It thrives on the quiet awe of others. But here's the thing about old money. It makes assumptions. It assumes that because it's always had wealth, it understands how wealth works. It assumes that connections are the same as control. And it assumes that a working-class man in a borrowed tuxedo poses no real threat to their carefully polished world. Tonight, they were about to learn the difference between having money and controlling it. 8:45 p.m. Dinner service was in full swing. The mood had shifted from polite cocktail tension to full-blown celebration. The ceremony had been flawless. Victoria, my daughter, was radiant in her Vera Wang gown. Preston Thury, the groom, played his part like he'd been born rehearsing it. Even I had to admit, they looked good together. But beauty can hide a lot of ugly truths. And the real test was about to begin. Preston Whitmore Sr. stood, lifting his glass. The room fell silent. 350 guests turned toward the head table as if choreographed. Crystal glasses caught the light of those $25,000 chandeliers. It felt cinematic, like a frozen moment from a Society magazine cover. "Friends, family, and honored guests," he began, his voice carrying that slow, deliberate confidence that only comes from a lifetime of never being told no. "Tonight, we celebrate not just the union of 2 young people, but the joining of 2 families." Polite applause. Knowing smiles. Everyone playing their roles perfectly in this grand performance of privilege. "Victoria," he said, turning toward my daughter, "you have brought such joy to our family. Your grace, your intelligence, your character, these are the qualities that make us proud to call you our daughter. Our daughter." The phrase hit me like a gut punch. But then he raised his glass higher, and with a warm smile that could have been painted on for the cameras, he said, "I especially want to thank the man who raised you to be the remarkable woman you are today." And he looked directly at him, Richard Morrison, the distinguished stranger sitting at the head table. "To Victoria's father," Preston continued, "a man who embodies everything we admire about integrity and dignity." Applause. Thunderous applause. 350 people on their feet, raising their glasses to a man who had never changed my daughter's diaper, never sat up through her fevers, never once sacrificed a single thing for her happiness. And there she was, my daughter, smiling through tears, beaming with gratitude, raising her glass toward Morrison and mouthing the words, "I love you, Daddy." 26 years of fatherhood erased in one toast. But Preston Sr. wasn't finished twisting the knife. He went on, voice calm, commanding, dripping with irony. In a world where so many young people lack proper role models, Victoria was blessed with a father who taught her the difference between class and mere wealth. The crowd melted in admiration. Morrison smiled awkwardly, pretending to be humble, and I sat at table 18, invisible in my borrowed tuxedo, watching my daughter give away my legacy to a stranger. But something started to shift. A few faces in the crowd were changing. Margaret Henderson, she'd spoken to me earlier, froze with her glass halfway to her lips. Dr. Walsh glanced between Morrison and me, confusion spreading across his face. And Sarah Chen, she'd stopped clapping entirely, staring straight at me, her expression hardening with realization. They remembered our conversation. They knew. They knew who the real father was, and they weren't the only ones. Near the kitchen doors, Catherine Brooks, the event coordinator, was frowning at her phone. Her team hovered nearby, whispering nervously. The catering supervisor kept checking his watch. 9 p.m., final payment deadline, because they'd been told service might be interrupted if certain conditions weren't met. Preston Sr. finished his toast with the smug flourish of a man who'd never been contradicted in his life. "To Victoria and Preston," he declared, "may their marriage be as blessed as the family that raised her." Applause. Laughter. Champagne glasses clinking. But I wasn't clapping, because I knew something they didn't. The man who'd paid for every petal, every drop of champagne, every chandelier shimmer in that room, was standing up from table 18. The crowd was still celebrating when I began walking toward the stage. At first, no one noticed, but then the ripple started, a whisper through the glittering crowd. People turned. Margaret Henderson's eyes widened. Dr. Walsh's color drained. And Victoria, my daughter, saw me coming. For a brief second, our eyes met. And she knew. She knew this wasn't the look of disappointment or hurt. It was resolution. Preston III instinctively stepped closer to her, protective. Preston Sr. was still shaking hands, grinning. He didn't notice until I reached the microphone. "Excuse me," I said. The first few rows fell silent. The rest of the room kept chatting, unaware that their perfect evening was about to collapse like a house of cards. "My name," I said, voice clear through the speakers, "is Jim Hayes, and I'm Victoria's father." The effect was immediate. It was like someone hit pause on the entire room. Conversations froze. Glasses hovered midair. 350 people turned toward the man in the ill-fitting tuxedo, the man who had just shattered their fairy tale. Victoria's face went white. Preston III took a step forward, but I raised my hand. "For the past 30 minutes, I said evenly, you've been celebrating the wonderful father who raised my daughter." I pointed at Morrison, who now looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. "That man has never met Victoria before tonight." Gasps. A ripple of disbelief spread like a shockwave. "Preston," I continued, locking eyes with Senior, "you spoke beautifully about integrity and values, but you directed your praise at the wrong man." My lawyer, Richard Polson, stepped up beside me, briefcase open. He handed me a folder. "This," I said, holding it up, "is the contract for tonight's venue, signed by James Hayes. That's me." I flipped through the pages, voice steady but rising with each word. "The catering agreement, $85,000. The florist, $28,000. The musicians, $15,000. Every single vendor agreement for this evening signed and paid for by me." Faces in the crowd shifted. The realization was spreading. "The total cost of this wedding?" I said, pausing. $500,000. A murmur of disbelief filled the silence. Victoria whispered, trembling, "Daddy, please." "Don't." "Don't what?" I cut in. "Don't tell the truth? Don't exist?" Preston Sr.'s voice cut across the room. "Now see here. I can't what?" I said sharply. "Pay for my own daughter's wedding? Because that's exactly what I did." I lifted my phone, showing the banking app to the cameras now circling in the back. "This is the business account for Hayes Property Solutions. Current balance, $12.3 million. Every expense tonight transferred in full." Silence. Complete, heavy silence. "Hayes Property Solutions," I said, "is a company I built from the ground up over 30 years. We started with plumbing. Now we manage commercial properties in 23 locations. $8.9 million in annual revenue. Not bad for a simple plumber, right?" Catherine Brooks approached, voice tight. "Mr. Hayes, we need to discuss the final payment authorization." "Perfect timing," I said. "You need the last $340,000 before service can continue, correct?" Preston Sr. blinked. "What final payment?" I turned toward him. "Everything was arranged by me, through my attorney, through my accountant. The Whitmore family has no financial involvement in this wedding whatsoever." Gasps. Phones came out. The press, David Chen and his photographer were recording everything. "For 6 months," I said, "Victoria asked me not to mention my work at events. She didn't want people to know her father was a plumber. She wanted to fit in, I understood that. I wanted her to be happy." My voice dropped. "But tonight, she told you all that her father was dead, and she replaced me with a stranger." The crowd exploded into whispers. Preston Sr.'s jaw tightened. Victoria's tears came fast, mascara streaking down her face. "Preston," I said, "you praised loyalty and honesty, but your family just tried to erase a man who gave up everything for his daughter's future." I raised a folder high. "These are emails between Victoria and her planner, Melissa Chen. 23 messages." Victoria knew exactly who was funding her dream wedding. The journalists leaned closer. Cameras flashed. The perfect wedding was unraveling live. "So," I said, turning to Catherine, "that final payment, $340,000, is it still required?" She hesitated. "Yes, sir, to complete tonight's service." "Good," I said, "because I have one question before I sign it." I held up the check. The entire ballroom held its breath. "Does this venue provide service to people who are ashamed of their families?" Catherine froze. "Sir, because I'm not interested in funding a celebration of my own humiliation." And then I tore the check in half. The sound echoed through the ballroom like a gunshot. "The contracts are void," I said coldly. "No final payment means no continued service." Victoria screamed. not in disbelief, in panic. "You can't do this," she shouted. "This is my wedding." "Yes," I said quietly. It was. The chaos began instantly. Guests gasped, servers froze, the string quartet stopped mid-note. Victoria lunged toward me, silk and diamonds flashing under the chandeliers. "Daddy, please, there has to be another way." "There isn't," I said. "Not when you've burned the bridge." Preston III grabbed my arm. "You're insane. You can't destroy this over a grudge." "It's not a grudge," I said. "It's a lesson." Catherine barked into her radio. "Attention all stations, service suspension in effect, secure all payments." The staff moved with military precision, clearing tables, removing glasses, shutting down stations. Preston Sr. was livid. "This is outrageous. I'll have you arrested." Polson stepped forward. "My client has fulfilled every contractual obligation. The service was satisfactory." Preston barked. "Was it?" I said. "Because part of the service I paid for was treating my family with respect." Dr. Walsh approached the stage. "Jim, I owe you an apology." "No apology needed," I said softly. "You didn't make her choices." Around us, whispers turned to outrage. "How could she do that?" someone muttered. "The Whitmores knew," another hissed. $500,000? Someone else gasped. David Chen's camera clicked. The fall of the Whitmores was being documented in real time. Victoria sank into her chair, sobbing. Her gown, $32,000 of handmade silk, puddled around her like spilled champagne. 26 years, she cried. "You're throwing away 26 years." "I'm not throwing anything away," I said. "You did that when you told the world I was dead." The ballroom emptied quickly. Guests whispered apologies, pity, judgment, all of it blending into a low, poisonous hum. Preston Sr. made one final move. "Hayes, let's be reasonable. Name your price." I turned. "You think this is about money?" "Everything's about money," he snapped. "That's where you're wrong," I said quietly, slipping the torn check into my pocket. "This is about something you can't buy. Respect." By 10 p.m., the Ashford Estate, once the most glamorous venue in Connecticut, stood silent. The photographers packed their cameras. The musicians packed their cases. Victoria sat alone at the head table. Her new husband watched her from the exit, a look of disgust flickering behind his perfect smile. And Richard Morrison, the fake father, had vanished into the night, probably praying no one ever connected his name to this disaster. But someone had connected the dots. Someone had recorded everything. And by morning, every whisper of that night would become a headline, because sometimes the truth doesn't whisper. Sometimes it roars. And when it does, you can hear it echo through every empty ballroom that used to feel like power. But tonight, power had changed hands. And the man they thought didn't belong in the room was the only one who ever owned it. Opening hook voice deepens. 30 years of sweat, sacrifice, and sleepless nights, building a business from nothing into an empire that carried my family's name. And in one single night, it all came crashing down. Not because of failure, not because of betrayal from an enemy, but because of my own daughter. Beat, softer tone, emotional reflection. When I walked into that ballroom, the chandeliers glowing, the champagne flowing, the kind of night people spend their entire lives trying to capture in a photograph. I didn't come to make a scene. I came to witness her happiness. Victoria, my little girl, standing there in her $1,000 gown, surrounded by people who only smiled when the cameras were flashing. But when she looked up at me that night, her eyes weren't filled with love. They were filled with fear. "Victoria," I said, walking up to her table. She looked at me, red-rimmed eyes, trembling lips, and said, "Are you happy now? You've ruined everything." I didn't ruin anything. I just stopped paying for the illusion. She wiped her nose with a napkin that probably cost more than most families' dinners. 30 years building your precious business, and you destroyed it all in one night. I smiled sadly. My business will be fine. It's built on real relationships with real people who value honest work. But your marriage? I glanced toward the Whites, still locked in a heated argument. That might be a different story. Preston III was waving his hands angrily at his father, his voice echoing through the empty ballroom. "You said you handled the financial arrangements. You said everything was covered." His father, Preston Sr., tried to calm him. "We assumed." "You assumed wrong," the son snapped. "Do you have any idea how this looks? My wife's father just publicly humiliated our entire family." Victoria flinched at the word humiliated. And that's when it hit me. The wound wasn't about money, it was pride. Not that Victoria had lied about her background. Rich people lie about inconvenient relatives all the time. The real problem was that the lie had been exposed publicly, dramatically, and with evidence. In their world, image was everything. And now Their image was shattered. Richard Polson, my attorney, quietly packed up his briefcase beside me. "Jim," he said, "legally speaking, you're completely protected. All contracts were clear. The payment terms were defined. No court will find fault with you." He paused, meeting my eyes. But personally speaking, that was either the bravest thing I've ever seen or the most devastating. Maybe both. Victoria stood slowly. Her wedding dress rustled through the silence of the empty hall. And for a moment, I didn't see the grown woman. I saw the little girl who used to wait by the door, eager to tell me about her day. "I loved you," she said softly. "Despite everything, I loved you." "Loved," I echoed, past tense. "You just destroyed your marriage before it even started." She shook her head, tears falling. "No, you did," I sighed. "No, Victoria, you did when you chose shame over family. I just made the consequences visible." The Whitmores approached us, faces tight, voices controlled like generals after a lost battle. Preston III looked at her, tone cold and precise. "Victoria, we need to discuss our options." "Options?" she asked bitterly. "You mean damage control, media management, financial restructuring?" He ignored her sarcasm. "This situation is manageable, but it will require significant adjustments to our original plans." Even now, he was speaking in corporate code. Their humiliation wasn't devastating. It was manageable. Their love wasn't broken. It just required adjustments. For the first time that night, Victoria truly looked at both men, the one she married and the one who raised her. And for once, she saw them clearly. Preston represented everything she thought she wanted: status, security, social acceptance. And me? I represented everything she'd been trying to escape: work, honesty, earned respect. "I need to think," she whispered. "Think quickly," Preston said. "The longer this story circulates, the harder it becomes to contain." He wasn't comforting her. He was managing her. As I prepared to leave, Catherine Brooks, the event manager, approached me quietly. "Mr. Hayes," she said, "for what it's worth, in 20 years of managing events, I've never seen anyone handle humiliation with such dignity." "Thank you," I said softly. Behind me, Victoria's voice cracked. "Daddy, will you ever forgive me?" I stopped at the ballroom doors, turned back. She stood alone in her wedding gown, surrounded by empty tables and cold chandeliers. "Victoria," I said, "forgiveness isn't something you ask for once and receive forever. It's something you earn every day through your choices." "What does that mean?" she asked. "It means," I looked at her one last time, "the next move is yours." By Sunday morning, the story broke. Headline on the Fairfield County Social Register: "Wedding of the season ends in financial drama as bride's father cancels payment." Photos, quotes, full cost breakdown. By noon, it was viral across Connecticut. By evening, it was national. At 7 a.m., my phone rang. "Daddy," Victoria's voice trembled. "It's everywhere. Everyone's talking about it." "What are they saying?" I asked. "Some call you a hero. Others say you're cruel." She paused. "The Whitmores, they're not speaking to me. Preston says he's evaluating our situation." "Evaluating?" I repeated. "Like a stock portfolio?" Her silence said it all. "Victoria," I said gently, "you built your marriage on lies. Lies have consequences." "I know that now," she whispered. By Monday, the financial aftershocks began. The estate was suing for unpaid balances, vendors at immediate payment. The gossip network in the tri-state area spread the scandal like wildfire. And then Preston Sr. called me directly. "Hayes, we need to settle this like gentlemen." "I thought we already did," I replied. "This publicity is hurting both our families," he said. "My business relationships are suffering. My son's marriage is collapsing. I'm prepared to offer compensation." He still didn't get it. After everything, he thought it was about money. "Preston," I said quietly, "you can't buy your way out of this. Your family tried to erase me from my daughter's life. Money won't fix that." "Then what do you want?" he demanded. "I want Victoria to decide who she really is," I said. "And I want you to stay out of it." Greenwich society was trembling. The Whitmores found themselves disinvited from events, their charity board positions restructured, their business reputation tainted. But the real consequence wasn't social, it was personal. Preston III had never truly loved Victoria. He'd loved the idea of transforming her, the project of turning a working-class girl into a perfect society wife. And when that illusion shattered, so did his affection. Within 2 weeks, he filed for annulment. Grounds: fraudulent misrepresentation of background and financial status. Public record: permanent stain. Victoria moved back to her Manhattan apartment, the one I had quietly paid for, and for the first time in her adult life, she was truly alone. Days later, she called again. "The annulment came through," she said softly. "I'm sorry to hear that." "Are you really?" she asked. "I never wanted your marriage to fail," I said. I just wanted it built on truth. Well, now I have nothing. No husband, no reputation, no family. You have the same thing you've always had, Victoria, the choice to be who you really are instead of who you think people want you to be. And if I make that choice, she asked, if I stop being ashamed of where I came from, maybe we can rebuild? It's only too late, I said quietly, when one of us stops breathing. There was a long pause. I'll think about it, she whispered. That's all I've ever asked. 6 weeks later, she knocked on my office door. Not my home. My office, Hayes Property Solutions, Suite 101. The empire she'd once pretended didn't exist. She stood there, no designer dress, no diamonds, just jeans, a sweater, and a look I hadn't seen in years. Humility. Hi, Daddy. Hello, Victoria. Can we talk? She sat across from me, the same chair where she once did her homework as a teenager while I filled out invoices late into the night. How are you doing? I asked. Honestly? Terrible, she said. The annulment made the papers. I lost my job. My friends won't return my calls. I'm sorry, I said softly, but maybe it's time. She nodded. Do you know how exhausting it is to pretend every single day, to measure every word, every gesture, just to fit in? I stayed silent. She needed to let it out. I've been thinking about what you said, she continued, about earning forgiveness through daily choices. I want to make different choices now. What kind? I asked. I want to work. Real work. Not managing galas or charity dinners. I want to learn what built everything I took for granted. I looked at her closely, searching for the performance, the manipulation. But what I saw instead was determination. The business isn't glamorous, Victoria. It's early mornings, difficult customers, and problems with no easy answers. I know, she said. I've been studying property management, leasing, maintenance. I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking for a chance. What about your apartment? I asked. I gave it up, she said with a faint smile. Extended stay hotel for now. Turns out, when your father cuts you off and your husband leaves, you learn budgeting fast. For the first time in months, I felt something stir inside me. Pride. There's a junior position open, I told her. Residential services, entry level, $38,000 a year. She blinked. That's more than I've ever earned. It's more than most earn, period, I said. You'll report to people younger than you. You'll take criticism. You'll face clients who know your story. I understand. Do you? I asked gently, because this isn't about redemption. This is about whether you want to build something real or just find another kind of security. She thought for a long moment. Then, quietly, 6 months ago, I would have said security. But I've learned something. Security built on lies isn't security. It's just delayed disappointment. I want to build something real, even if it takes years. The job starts Monday, I said. 8 a.m., business casual. I'll be there, she said. As she stood at the door, she turned back. Daddy, she said softly, thank you for the job and for teaching me that self-respect isn't inherited or married into. It's earned. I nodded. Now you're starting to understand what I've been trying to tell you your whole life. And for the first time since she was 16,